Okay. Maybe. Aha. Does it say it's recording?
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Okay. Yeah. Robert Haston is just going to see all this material. So.
Nice. Hi, Robert.
Hi, Robert.
Okay. Awesome. So do y'all feel good about all that?
I think so.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Brian always does like a little intro, so I'll do that. And then we'll get started. But he always has the like thick glasses and he always like takes them off and he's like, welcome to midweek. And so I don't have my, I can't do it.
We need to get you glasses. I have some like fake glasses that I used to have.
Dang, I was not prepared to be Brian for tonight.
As former expert on loneliness turned expert on friendship, and Karen Ivy, who has found the worst joke on the planet.
Oh gosh.
And I'm
There's more to it. Maybe I didn't read the whole thing. And surely that's not the punchline. Oh,
oh gosh. Okay. Robert, this is for Brian. Also always does this for our promo videos. He like speaks directly to Robert in a very serious voice, but I thought that was like
I need to turn my clock off, don't I?
You're right. No, you're good. I didn't know what it was. Robert, this is for midweek or February 10th. Godspeed. The screen is doing funky things right now.
right.
Awkward.
I have a feeling we'll just have some background noise because my dog's going to bark and, it's just going to be what it is.
Clock is real loud, though. When I have a real house, I can get away from the clock.
I know. I'm like back as far as I can and there's still like all this noise. Okay. Okay, Robert. Now you can actually start using some of this material. Here we go. Okay. Hi, y'all. Welcome to Midweek in the City, COVID edition, Zoom edition. We have Karen and Andrea here, and we're so excited. So we took a break last week, so I'm excited to have this back now this week and kind of keep clicking through this semester. So we have a lot of good stuff, and tonight we're talking about friendship. And, it's almost Valentine's Day. Say what you will about Valentine's Day, but in light of that, we're going to talk about friendship, because that's something that we don't talk about a whole lot in the church. I feel like the world kind of focuses on romantic love, right? And that's all that they want to talk about, but we've kind of have pushed friendship aside a little bit, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. I know that's not a new topic for y'all, but that's something that I think is super important. It's something that's worth revisiting. And so, yeah, so that's what we're going to do tonight. So we have Andrea and Karen. Hello. They have cool backgrounds and I don't. My computer won't let me.
She has the map of the world. And
yeah,
friendship around the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So we can get started. And so, like I was saying earlier, when I was thinking through, okay, it's Valentine's Day, but all the world talks about, not just on Valentine's Day, but all the time, is romantic love, right? That's all we see in TV shows. We don't see a lot of just Friends on TV, unless it's literally the show Friends, like Karen is currently on set for, right? We don't see a whole lot of that on TV or in movies. And when we do, it's not normally a super healthy friendship, right? We don't get a lot of that. And so, and especially when we look at the New Testament, right? And the Greek, there, when we look at our Bibles, we only have one English word for love, right? But in Greek, there was agape, there was philia, there was eros, there was all these things. And so today we're going to focus on love of friendship. And so why do you think we as a culture have kind of devalued friendship? Do y'all have any thoughts on how that has happened, or why that has happened?
Yeah, I can get us started. We have several thoughts on this, but but one angle that I thought of on this particular question is I think, every generation has had a little bit different values. So just generically, not necessarily specific to the church, but I think because of our environment to some degree and some of our surroundings and some of the things that the generation that many of us are a part of have gone through, there's a bit more focus on protecting oneself, focusing on what do I want? What is my voice? And that's not all bad. In fact, I think there's a lot of really positive things with being in touch with self and what do I need and what do I need to raise as far as concern or ideas and things like that. But because there's kind of this empowerment trend, I think many times it leads us to think an awful lot about what do I want. And I think within friendship, it's not going to work well if that is a common question in that relationship. I think it's very hard to make friends if the focus is, where can I find people who will give me what I want? At least in moving in different places, friendships didn't start to happen until I was willing to give. And that's probably true of any relationship. But I think our culture has sort of latched onto the idea that a romantic relationship can give you a lot more of what you want. And a friendship may not do that at the same level. And so I think maybe that's why it's not as focused on, because it really exists because of a two-way type of give and take.
Yeah. And if you see, if you know people in your life that haven't gotten there, right, that are still kind of focused on what people can give them, their friendships don't last long, right? It's always, they have one or two friends for a season and then they move on, right? And I've been there, in times in my life when I have just been really inwardly focused. And yeah, that's a really good thought, Karen.
Yeah, I think I wanted to add to that too, that there is the friendship component to the romantic relationship, but there's also a pretty heavy sex component. And unfortunately, the sex component is really probably more the focus in our culture today on TV and advertising and social media. What can I do? What can you do to make you look better? What product can I advertise to you to make you look better, more attractive, to the opposite sex? And those aren't really capitalizing on the friendship aspect of the very necessary friendship, companionship aspect of the romantic relationship either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think because even in like buddy comedies or like literally the show Friends, or, the attempts that Hollywood makes at showing friendships is still, in Friends, they're still having romantic relationships between each other. There's, or you have to do something really over the top and extreme, to make it, worth having a movie over, right? Or, that's the only kind of picture that we see. So yeah, there's all these warped kind of depictions of either attempts at friendship or, just consumption with sex and with romantic relationships. Yeah. So, okay. So we've devalued, we've kind of taken away all of those things. So how can we kind of regain friendship? If that's what's happened, how can we maybe heighten our view of friendship? I know for me, it's easy for me to say, well, so-and-so is my friend, but I really don't actually know anything about them, or they're an acquaintance, or I have my church friends and my work friends. And I use the term friend really loosely, but like you were saying, I've also devalued friendship a lot. So how can we kind of regain friendship as a higher thing in our lives?
I guess a little bit of that goes back to probably the first retreat that the singles group had for a while, and the first one that I certainly had attended after I kind of discovered you guys, which is thanks to Karen. But
so glad.
Yeah. And the guest speaker, and this was like 5 years ago or so, and the guest speaker said some things that really still stuck with me about the different categories of friendships and how there could be friendships based on common interests or co-location or going through something peripheral together. just in that phase of your life, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But she spoke about a deeper spiritual friendship. And I think she used texts that was created by some monks in the 12th century or something. I might be really butchering this because it was a while ago, but they talked about what it meant to have a spiritual friend and the depth that goes to. And so all of which is to say, I think one of the ways that we could try to regain the value of friendship is to understand that there are different categories of friends, and that you're only going to have so many of those deep spiritual friendships that reach that level, that reach that level of trust and accountability between you, and that are based on this incredibly deeply ingrained set of core values that you both have in common, rather than just having a little bit more superficial layer of interest in common.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point, because we're not going to be, we're not going to have this super intimate, deep friendship with everybody, right? Because like you said, there's going to be this almost agreement, or these kind of common set of things that you're agreeing on to have that level of friendship, right? And that's okay that you can't, that you're not going to have that with everyone. That probably wouldn't be sustainable, but yeah, that you have to kind of be able to come together and agree on, this is what we're going to do for each other. This is what our time is going to look like. Yeah, that's great.
I think another thing that's kind of cool in a situation where it's a spiritual friendship, I feel like most Christians that I've spoken to have had an instance. It could have been in the grocery store or whatever it was. But we went to the grocery store a whole lot more and engaged with each other. But it's almost like you have an initial or an immediate connection with someone who also loves Jesus. It's just cool how I think sometimes it's not always something that you pick out yourself necessarily. It's like God has provided this person in a moment's time or a long-standing friendship in order to develop and grow you and be a part of that pruning process. I mean, it's so valuable, especially in a pandemic, which I know we'll get to a little bit later. But I think, and as a single adult, it's easy to do a lot of things independently, but you miss out on that kind of rubbing together, sharpening each other, learning, fumbling, making mistakes, but like experiencing the grace that comes with a spiritual friendship, and correction at times, and celebration, and so many things that are rooted in our understanding of the Lord and our relationship with him.
Yeah.
There's a serious trust there that you pinpointed, Karen, that, and because I really think trust is one of the really deep things at the root of these deep friendships. And I think you pinpointed this really when you said that there's just this automatic connection. There's a mutual understanding that the other person gets and has felt and experienced and understands the grace that they were given. And you anticipate, rightly so, generally, that they would give you such grace as well, so that you feel like you could be yourself, that you could mess up, make mistakes, and be human with this person, because they understand the grace of God and his mercy in terms of what he did for any of us, us as a person. And so I think you're just more likely to extend that grace to another person. It's just a core value, a way of thinking that we just sort of adopt as part of the family of Christians.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, we're supposed to have friends that are non-believers. We're supposed to have, diverse set of friends. But I think, and this is what I want to talk about tonight too, is, your core, your people, the people that are holding you up, that are kind of your inner circle, right? That are going to be your accountability. And, I mean, you can go to the movies with them, but it's not just like you going out and hanging out with them, right? There's more to it than that. And there's a difference there, right? And so, and it's okay to have some friends that are like, that you don't have that relationship with, and it's that's okay. But yeah, I think if we started to invest a little bit more in our inner circle, yeah, that would be healthy, right? I forget to do that a lot. And I know some people listening are in different life stages when it comes to friendship. I know for me, there's been seasons where I feel like I have a lot of friends and it's great. I feel surrounded by good people. And then sometimes for me, it was when I was in grad school, I looked up and I was like, who are my friends? Like, where are my friends? And that's okay too. And so if you're listening to this and you're feeling lonely, or if you're like, oh, friendship, that kind of makes me feel sad because I feel like I don't have as much of that in my life right now, or maybe you're surrounded by a lot of great friends, and just know that it's okay to, you're always going to have kind of different stages of life where this goes up and down. And so, but regardless, no matter what kind of stage you're in, you can still pursue spiritual friendship, this kind of covenant friendship that we're talking about. So just as an encouragement to those that are listening. But have you all experienced that kind of different stages in your life with different friendships? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, moving around with the military, there have been some dark times where, I maybe had one friend, and she was working 18 hours a day, so I almost never saw her. And there's a sense of loneliness and a sense of loss there. I think that, yeah, I think that it's safe to say that most everyone has gone through these seasons, and they are just seasons. They're not forever. They are just stages. There is some comfort in what you said, that the spiritual friendship doesn't have to be confined to a certain life stage. It doesn't have to be confined to a certain location. And we're kind of disconnected right now because of the pandemic, but in some ways we're more connected than ever. And so it defies kind of the rules of age, and the rules of location and things like that bond. And so it can be found even in this kind of disconnected world with the help of modern technology. I think, there's a lot of caution there, because I think with social media and technology, there's a lot of opportunity to engage in some relationships that do not meet that need, that might look at first like they do. So it's hard. But yeah, I dare say that most of us have been through that at one point or another, that are living on this earth as adults.
I remember when I moved to San Antonio in 2006, actually, I was just out of grad school and I didn't know anyone. And I chose San Antonio purposefully because I just kind of liked my experience of it the few times I'd come. And it seemed to me at the time I was making the decision that it was somewhat prayerful. And the job that I applied for, it worked out. But I also kind of wanted to, for whatever reason, prove to myself that I could go to a city by myself and make it. And then once I did, I had given myself a week before I started my job, and it was so lonely. Like and that was just a week. And I've had other stages that were longer than that, where I felt disconnected from friendship. But I just remember going to Target just to like be around people. I think friendship is something God has really given us as a gift. And when we don't experience it, we crave it. And it's very much like other relationships that we have or we want or desire. And I'll never forget just multiple trips to Target just to like say hi.
Yeah.
Just
interact. I can talk to. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
100% there. I would call that the first 2 weeks or so of anywhere I moved to, I would call that the period of anonymity, where I could die in my apartment and no one would know. And, that's exactly what you're talking about, Karen. And yes, I would go shopping just because then I had this sense that I was around people and among people, and they don't know that no one in the whole wide world of that town knows my name. They just know that I'm another person shopping there.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't know if you experienced this, but as an introvert, I had to step outside my comfort zone and quite a bit. And because of how that loneliness and disconnectedness made me feel, it made me do things that were bolder, and in terms of seeking out friendships, in terms of seeking out a church community. And thank goodness we have that. I know a lot of people that are not in the community of believers struggle with the equivalent of the church as sort of a place to plug in,
Yeah.
But I definitely made decisions and stepped outside that comfort zone, just reached out, and even though it was uncomfortable, to try to get away from that period.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. I know and I'm an extrovert, but there's still a lot in me, especially when, right, like even when we moved here to San Antonio over the summer, where it was like, well, I don't want to, I don't know, be a burden on them, or I don't, I would talk myself out of all of these opportunities for, connection or for friendship, because I don't know, for some reason I felt like it would be a burden to somebody, or it would be, um, and we can do that so easily. And, whether that's social anxiety or just us kind of, being timid to make that move, yeah, it takes some level of us stepping out of our comfort zone. Right. Cause I think, especially I grew up with, a lot of people that were kind of in my neighborhood. So I didn't really have to try hard to be around kids my age. There was people just kind of at my disposal, right? I just walked out my door and it was like, kids are running around. And so it wasn't until I was an adult really that I was like, oh, I have to go find people. Like I have to go intentionally, kind of initiate a friendship. And so that's not always natural, introvert or extrovert. That's hard. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, the way the education system works, I mean, if you're doing like, well, not this year, but if you're doing public or private school, and rather than say like a homeschooling, or even with them, they have co-ops and things like that. But there's an infrastructure of community, and you go to high school and college, and there's this infrastructure community. I know you mentioned that kind of just went poof when you went to grad school. It just didn't have that. You're just kind of out there on your own, and you're out there on your own as an adult. And I remember there was a time when I thought, I kind of wish I was old or elderly so I could go live in a retirement community, like an assisted living area, because then it would be like college again,
I feel that. I feel that. That is good. Yeah, absolutely. And that's, before we move on to, I think this is important to know, because I feel like, maybe I kind of did this to myself, especially with single adults. We're like, well, we'll talk about friendship. We're not going to talk about romantic relationships, but let's be clear that friendship is a huge need, no matter what stage of life you're in, no matter if you're married or you're single, if you're old or young, right? I've talked a lot about this as me and Blaze were, journeying towards marriage and those things. Friendship was never a part of the conversation, about how to maintain friendships once you get married, about how to, what that looks like after you get married, but it's such a huge need, because you need friends outside of your spouse, and you need friends if you're a single adult, and you need friends if you're an older adult, right? And that might look different in those stages, but yeah. And so that's something that I feel like we don't, for some reason, we forget that everyone needs friendship. Right? Like we act like, oh, when we get married, or oh, when we do this, that need is going to go away, but that's not true.
Well, and you bring that up, and I know something that we've talked, I think all three of us before about, is our experiences at various churches where there is a lot of focus on the family unit, like strengthening that, and that's important. That's really important, and I get that. But there's not a lot of conversations about friendship, from a more, I mean, we're doing it now, right? But it's not a common topic for sermon. At least it hasn't been in my experience. And I think it might be something we think about, or it might heighten our view if we had it more on the forefront of, like you said, marital counseling, if we had it more on the forefront of a lot of the conversations that we have as a church body, and really prizing that. I think too, like, of people who have lost spouses, that's going to be devastating no matter what. But talking about friendship in that setting, and needing to have that community, family, but also a community of friends.
Yeah.
Any situation, really, having people around you who can support you and provide different perspectives and different things to help you in whatever life stage or situation you find yourself in.
Yeah.
I think we've globally found ourselves in a situation that no one could have predicted, and that would that we had known, making sure that everybody could have a community of people to surround themselves with to just deal with this, this isolation, the mental health implications of the pandemic have been, we don't even know. We haven't even, it's a tip of the iceberg, I think, what we know about the mental health implications. You guys were talking about that some, I think, yesterday, and they were already generationally, it's already been a challenge prior to this pandemic, but the degree of isolation and the role that community would play in an unexpected worldwide disaster like this. I mean, you never know what's going to happen in this life, in this broken world. And so having that community infrastructure, I think, it plays a huge role in the face of the unexpected as well as in everyday life.
Yeah. And that's, yeah, we've talked about with the three of us, the differences between generations, and especially the generation that grew up with social media being the norm, right? We don't have to go into the social media rabbit hole, but I mean, and I've fallen into that trap too, of feeling like I'm in connection with other people. But really, that's just, I saw something about them on Facebook, but I never actually said anything to them or talked to them, or really, we've kind of whittled it down to, and by the end of the day, I'm feeling super isolated, right? And yeah, and you don't realize it until suddenly you look up and you realize that you haven't had that meaningful connection in a long time. And yeah, it's just something, I don't know, a grain of salt as we, use social media, and as we kind of figure out what friendship looks like in the future. Something to think about. It might look like connection, but it's really kind of isolating us more. Yeah.
It's hard to have that trust.
Yeah.
That there's this sense of, I can say whatever I want because of anonymity, but that's not accountability, and that's not trust.
Right.
That's like having there's a barrier there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So that's a good kind of segue into our next question. What are some of the obstacles, and maybe we answered this a little bit, what are some of the obstacles that we face if we're trying to pursue this kind of friendship that we're talking about? What makes that hard to do? I know isolation is one thing, right? We've just kind of become more isolated. And are there other things that you feel like, the fear of stepping out of your comfort zone? I know we talked about that. Are there any other obstacles that y'all see when it comes to pursuing that level of friendship?
I hadn't thought about sharing this, but one thing that comes to mind, and I have a specific example, is, well, you were saying, Megan, that there was a point when you moved here where you felt like, I don't want to be a burden. Like, I think some of it is self-perception that you have to really deal with. Like, what am I believing about myself as I work on my friendships? And is it true? You can really get in your own way, maybe more than anything else. And I know I've done that at times where I've gone through some of the hardest days where I thought, like, I'm not my best self. Therefore, I'm going to wait to engage with my friends or engage in friendship until I figure this out and get it right. And I think that couldn't be the more wrong way to handle that. And I've had good friends. In fact, Brian, I've talked to him once, and I think it's that isolation can be really dangerous, and also the things you believe about yourself. One thing, like, I feel like for me, often I think like I need to have things right, whatever right means, like kind of together to be productive or valuable in a friendship. And I know that's not true. Like I've worked through that lie. But I even remember when I moved to my new house, and it was a mess. And there was so much of me that wanted to wait and have all my friends over once I had everything put together. But the house that I bought needed work before I could do that. So it would have been a while. And I remember thinking, I can't do that. Like, I'm just going to have to invite them into my mess, And I had friends come over amidst boxes and dust and walls that needed to be painted. And it was such a very real picture for me of like, it really doesn't matter. Like, I have to let go of myself or any beliefs I may have about myself, or what I need to be to experience this real friendship that is waiting, and most times I know stages in life, but it was such a beautiful picture of like, hey, just come be in my dust and boxes, and people did, and it was the best conversations. It was not about where we were, but it was about our friendship.
Yeah.
You, Karen, of course, is just sort of a natural born talented writer. And the metaphor that you just put in there that I just was astounding to me, just absolutely fantastic, about inviting them into your mess. And like, I think that's metaphorically so true as well, that I guess I was going to say, I mentioned it a couple times, but because it's been an issue for me in the past, just trusting people not to hurt you, or if they do, not to hurt you, but trusting people enough that you can accept, you can allow them to see your vulnerability, that you can invite them into your mess,
Yeah.
and that you can accept a bit of constructive help, because knowing that they're in it for you, and not for their own purposes, and just, yeah, I couldn't have said it. No one could. I don't know anybody could say it better, Karen. That just inviting people into your mess, just as it is. Clean up for the housekeeper, but don't worry about it for your friends. I don't
Yeah,
know.
love
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good, because we act like the things we believe about ourselves just stay, right? It's just about, it may impact our self-talk, or it may impact what we believe about ourselves, but we're not in a vacuum, right? We don't exist in a vacuum, and that's going to impact our friendships, right? If you don't think that you're worthy of having people come in, and maybe it's a little messy, but if you're not worthy of, if you don't feel like you're worthy of that happening, then that's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So the things we believe about ourselves don't just stay with ourselves. Um, that's huge. And that takes a lot of work. And like Karen, you said, you worked to get through that lie that you were believing, in your life, but that's hard. Like that's like, that takes work. In counseling, we call it thought restructuring, right? Like, where's the lie, and how can we take this idea and turn it into truth, right? But that process of dealing with the lie, that gets expedited in community, right? Because other people are able to call out the good things in you. They're able to call out the things that are not Christ-like in you, right? That you don't see for yourself. Yeah, but Andrea, it takes trust to do that. And so
I think too that taking the time to restructure and call out the lie is expedited by community. I think it is, decelerated by filling your schedule with things that, that allow you to avoid that time required to do that deep thinking, and face yourself, or face lies that are in your head or whatever. And I know that before the pandemic, that was something that I mean, I wouldn't tell you that I was trying to avoid thinking too hard and trying to avoid myself. So I just packed my schedule full of fun stuff to do. But I've packed my schedule full of fun stuff to do, and there are various reasons for that. I mean, I'm a 7, so I want to do everything, like Enneagram. But I think also that you need to pull back and do that, self-reflection, and also make time to spend that time with friends and community, to where you feel like you said, that people could kind of help each other along, and pull each other up, over the hurdles and things.
yeah, it's easy to fill your time, even if it's with friends, but if it's not the spiritual intentional friendship that we're talking about, it's easy to, and I'm the queen of that too, right? I fill my schedule, and I find ways to kind of numb out, or to occupy my mind, so that I don't have to deal with the messy stuff, to be able to move forward, right? Yeah, it's easy to do that even in community, if those friendships aren't aren't spiritually life-giving. And yeah, and you talked about the Enneagram, which y'all, I will make all of you Enneagram believers if it is my greatest work here. And so, yeah, so the Enneagram is huge in this, right? Because it helps us understand ourselves, but it also helps us understand other people. And I think for me, that's been huge for my friendships, because I'm like, oh, that's why you do that. Oh, and it makes me it lowers the stakes sometimes, because you're like, you're not just trying to annoy me. That's just something that, that's how you process this, have y'all ever felt that like the Enneagram has helped you in friendship? Yeah.
Yeah.
I've gone first a lot. You go first.
Okay. I feel like we're gonna use each other as examples, I think, here.
That's great.
I think we might.
Yeah, we might. So Karen is a 9, and I'm not gonna get the whole thing right, but one of the main defining features of a 9 is that they consider all the sides. They're not quick to move forward in one direction. They like to think about the angles. You maybe even play devil's advocate a little bit, and just make sure they consider all the potential points of view,
implications.
Yeah. So and I think that when having a discussion as a 7, sometimes I just want to go, well, look, this has got to be this way, and we got to just move forward in this direction. And I have appreciated, like, since learning about the Enneagram a little bit, and learning about kind of just the 9 with respect to Karen, for example. I'm going to know, Megan, that you are as well, and that
Mariner, the 9.
I've appreciated that. I've appreciated that thoughtfulness, and been more, I think, in some of our deeper, maybe even controversial discussions on some of our walks on the Saturdays, digging into a little bit of the hard stuff sometimes, like we do. I think it's been enlightening to me and helpful to kind of consider some of those things, and realize that that's what you're doing.
Yeah. And conversely, I don't want to minimize a 7 to one thing either. Like, there's so many great things about a 7 and unique things, unique qualities. But I think the movement into action is maybe where there's some real differences between our numbers. And where I'm going, like, oh, but have we thought about like the chain effect, and have we thought about like every angle, like you were saying? Like, I can tend to go that way, and I feel like it's such a gift to be with people who are not like you, because sometimes you just need to move. Like, it's not one of those decisions where you're choosing something ethically, it's just do it, right? Like, and I feel like being around a 7 or any of the other numbers bring out different great things that complement or encourage me to do things differently than my natural way, maybe, has been really, really helpful. It's so cool that God made us all so different, and that we really are like the body. Like, we need each other to not get stuck. Like, I don't need to get stuck. And maybe, Andrea, sometimes you just need a moment of pause, and I can say, like, I can try to help, facilitate that moment of pause or reflection or whatever for you. So I love how different and unique we are, and how important it is that it's like that.
Yeah, I think the body is a great example. Like, you need your hand for one thing, you need your feet for another, and they're structurally very different. Or your ears and your eyes are structurally very different, and they accomplish great things for the whole, but the loss is very deep without one of those. The loss is very noted, very substantially impactful on a person's life.
Yeah, definitely.
I won't call out any specific numbers on this, but there's like a number or two in the Enneagram where it's like, my initial response to that personality or some of those characteristics is like, whoa, like, that's a lot, or I don't see us being friends. Maybe, maybe I've even gone that far in my head, and I'm wrong every time. It seems like it's like, once I get to know that person and understand them, I'm like, I need you in my life. it's missing when it's not there. And so I think when we talk about friendship, it's important to realize that first impressions, are not, you can't put too much in that, and especially when we're talking about character traits or just different unique things about each one of us, we have to understand where that person's coming from, to really not judge it too quickly.
Yeah. I think you said it right, Megan, that understanding somebody's motivations,
Mm-hmm.
that they're generally a little bit more noble than to annoy you. You know, it's good. It's good to know. It's good to know that they're coming from a place of, their life experience and personality type that that just affects the way they perceive the world, and it's not intended to be a roadblock for you or whatever. It that definitely takes the emotional stakes down. I think Karen, you said that. I think that takes or one of you said that takes the stakes down several notches. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's a reason behind, and normally, I mean, all of us, so much of the the Enneagram talks about your motivations for doing things, and it talks about everyone kind of has a core fear, right? And so so much of our actions are about self-preservation and how we've learned to move through the world safely, right? Or to manage everything
Absolutely. Yeah.
that we're being hit with. And so, but two people can learn to do that super differently, right? Especially if you've grown up differently or you're around it, or two people in the totally same environment can still learn to handle it really differently. And that's not a bad thing, right? But yeah, that's something that I love about the Enneagram, because it helps me understand, oh no, this is how you've learned to cope. This is how you've learned to, to get through the world unscathed, and that's something that I've noticed in friendship too. I know there was a really good friendship that I had, and we ended up in a conflict, and I'm a 9, and conflict is like, I will avoid it at all costs, right? And it had kind of came to a head where it's like, okay, this is unavoidable now. And in retrospect, looking back, in light of the Enneagram, it actually really helped me understand what happened, because it didn't really end well. I don't know that we ever got past it. We both moved to different cities, and we've mended things, but I think looking back, I was like, oh, this person was in their stress arrow, and so was I. And we did not take the time to be mindful and think about that and go slowly, and that really helped me understand, what happened there. Like, why did that happen? But that's the other thing too. Friendship isn't always going to go well. It can be really harmful. Have y'all ever experienced something like that? Or friendship? I mean, and for me, as soon as there starts to be a conflict, I kind of scurry on out of there, right? And so, but if we do that every time there's a conflict, then we're not going to have friendships very long, right? Or they're not going to be meaningful ones. So have y'all ever had a friendship that maybe it went south, or maybe there was a conflict that you had to manage?
Yeah. I think that, I mean, it's happened a couple times, and when you're sort of a strong personality, I suppose it happens a few times. No, but I think generally, if a friendship goes south, it's not acute. There's a chronic issue that maybe nobody recognized consciously was an issue in the first place, that I think may have been there for a little while, and just kind of riding under the surface or building over time. And I think that, in retrospect, just thinking about this, I suppose that being intimidated enough by it or by the conflict to not want to discuss it while it's small.
Yeah.
My tendency is to wait for those things to get to where my emotional threshold is reached, and then it's a temper thing. Then I'm going to address it, because I have reached the threshold of where I can't stay silent about it anymore. And I mean, it always is something mutual on the other person's behalf as well. It always there's always going to be a bi-directional situation there. But I think establishing communication early on, if there's conflict, I mean, well, it's so hard and it's easy to say do that, but because these things, if you plant seeds of discontent and then they just sort of grow and grow and grow a little bit, to me, I don't know that there's any friendship that I could say was ever wrecked by one fight that was completely isolated or, you know?
Yeah. No, and that's literally exactly what happened, like in the example I was giving, right? I didn't take the time or the intentionality when things were small, when it was just, at the beginning of what snowballed, to address it. And if we had, nothing would have happened. Like we would have had a quick 5-minute conversation and everything would have been fine, right? But because I'm conflict avoidant, I waited until I literally could not keep going until we had the conversation. And then of course that was rough. What did I think was going to happen? But it's so easy to do that. And if we're talking about meaningful friendship that's going to last, we have to be willing to have conflict, right? Because that's inevitable. But yeah, that's hard.
That's very true. Willing to have conflict. Yeah. It's going to happen.
Yeah. And same thing you're saying. I think if we saw conflict as more natural, and I'm sure some people do, it's also, I think, maybe Enneagram or personality or whatnot. But if there's not conflict, right? I remember when I was doing in graduate school, my focus was counseling psychology. And one of the telltale signs that a relationship was in a really poor place was the couple or the individuals would say that we have zero conflict. That is a sign of really unhealthy relationships because it's not honest. Honesty means that you don't think alike 100% of the time, or that you don't interpret each other exactly correctly. That's going to happen. You're not going to think alike. You're going to misinterpret. That's part of reality. And so if you're not engaging in reality in your conversations, it's just going to be unhealthy. And so if we think about it from that angle, it's when the thing starts, and I've done the same thing you're talking about where I've put it off or thought it's not worth it. I'll get past it. It's no big deal. But when you think about it, that angle of this is what happens. This is normal. And if I don't deal with it now, it's just going to continue to get worse. Yeah, I agree completely. I think that's probably the worst situation to find yourself in when neither one of you have been honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a certain level of superficiality, if that's a word, to just sort of avoiding the things that could be potential source of conflict. And I think learning to discuss things that you disagree with someone you care about in a non-high stakes, reasonable manner is an acquired skill, which you won't acquire if you don't practice it. Yeah. And it's tough. You kind of just want everything to be hunky-dory all the time, but I think that, I think being able to go there when the emotional stakes are lower is something that I have regretted, in past relationships. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we don't believe that our friendship, well, this is a little too strong, but that it survives conflict. I don't know, maybe that's a little too strong. I'm not
sure. You're right. Yeah.
It's it can survive conflict. People and relationships can survive that. And
was it that deep of a friendship in the first
True.
place?
True. And then, I have an example of a situation in which the friendship didn't survive a conflict, but just like what you said, there's a lot of factors, but it wasn't supposed to.
Yeah.
And I won't get into all the specifics of that, but it was not a good relationship for either person. And so it didn't need to survive, but the conflict helped. confronting the issues helped move it to not surviving, but that was in the best interest of everybody, so
So I think that's what's so hard um, about friendship, especially if it's something that's going to last beyond, convenience or geographical boundaries, or, working together, whatever it is. If you're going to have friendship that is um, meaningful, that is spiritually deep, um, you need the balance of, accountability, but also boundaries. Um, and you need to be able to trust one another, but also not, I don't know, but also respect each other's personhood and space, right? And so that is it feels like walking on a tightrope a little bit, right? That's really hard to do. That's hard, and that's why conflict exists, right? You're always kind of tipping to one side or the other, and you kind of find a way to be in the middle. But that's what happens in marriage too. This is not like specific to friendship. That's why, like, you know, that's the same kind of thing that happens in any relationship. So how, and this is something that I'm still discerning in my own life. What does it look like to, in a friendship, um, have the accountability, like what we talked about, have the kind of iron sharpening iron relationship, where sometimes that's not comfortable or pretty or fun, right? But also have boundaries, right? Where we're not, we don't find ourselves in a toxic situation, or, maybe this relationship isn't something that has to continue. Do y'all have any thoughts on kind of finding that balance? Um, I don't know. That's a sticking point for me.
yeah, that's such a challenge. I honestly think my idea of what friendship was has changed so dramatically throughout my life. Like growing up, I really somehow got this concept that friendship was sacrifice, like equivalent. And like you did whatever it took to maintain the friendship. And I really didn't distinguish, like any friendship, right? And it's just that's not how Jesus did it. That's not, there's nothing biblical about that. Certainly he asked us to sacrifice and be generous and do things, lay down our lives at times. Like there's things that do show us that it's important to give and be willing to give, but there's nothing about that the friendship cost everything, and so I don't know. I think for me, as far as learning about setting some of my own boundaries, just has really been about figuring out that me trying to serve another person, friendship, whatever relationship, it does not accomplish what I want it to do if I am serving their needs. Like part of being a good friend is also and much more about empowering another person to be their own self and claiming it for your own person too. Like that is what's a beautiful friendship, and the result is so much more beautiful. So it may not look like, it sometimes looks like catering to the need of my friend. It sometimes looks like me maybe not taking an action and encouraging them to take that action. But that is, it's still very tricky to know all the time when one thing is in play or when, to move into the other. But that's where I've experienced it probably most, is learning, like, even in career counseling, which is what I did for years now that I lead the team that does that. Many times I just wanted to hand the student the job, like, here's your best job, like based on what you've told me. And what that does is take away the joy of that person owning their own process and figuring it out for themselves so that they actually can own their own success. And I think that's sometimes how it is in friendship. Like, what did they need to own in their own life process and development? What do I need to own? And many times it makes us have to kind of step back and just be the encourager, and let them figure it out on their own. Sometimes we need to be right there,
Yeah. And that's huge, Karen. I think as a fellow nine, yeah, it's easy to get wrapped up in, well, I guess friendship is I'm just kind of, I have to fold to whatever is best for you, or I have to, and it's really easy for me to just take on whatever shape somebody needs me to take, instead of just bringing my who I actually am to the table, right? And that's not helping anyone, because I need somebody else's full self. I don't need just whatever version of them they're willing to bring. I need their whole self, but I don't always do that. Yeah, because that means you have to do the hard work of discernment, right? And that's where we continuously have to turn our face to Jesus again, right? Because we need the Holy Spirit so badly to give us discernment in friendship, right?
Yeah, and you saying that makes me think too, like having gone from one kind of perception and way of doing things, I really, once I figured out this is not healthy, and this was a while back, I like kind of swung to the other, like, I'm not going to give, because I've been giving, too much almost to kind of help hold up every relationship, friendship that I had. And so it's like, nope, I'm taking a break. And you're right, the Holy Spirit really has to be the voice, because sometimes the voice of God is like, you need to back off and you need to serve and give. And other times it's very clear that it's like, just no, like, this is not yours. Like, let me be God and do the thing with this person, and let them do their whatever they need to do to respond.
Yeah.
And I don't always get it right. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I think that you mentioned kind of modeling after Christ, and something Brian actually said to me at one point when I was getting ready to let go of an employee, and I was preparing for this conversation. I mean, that's not a friendship, but the same rules apply, right? If you love another person, whatever your relationship is with them, but you have to tell them something very difficult because you love them, perhaps, in the case of a friend, that he sort of drew my attention to a verse that, and this was just, it's this teeny little thing, and it had such a profound impact on that and other conversations in the future, or after that conversation. And I think it's in Mark, actually. We might even be getting into it, but Jesus, I think, is talking to a rich man, and he has to tell him something he doesn't want to hear, about coming into his kingdom. And he says that he has to, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. And it's clearly something that this guy is not going to want to hear. And it says something to the effect of, Jesus looked at him and loved him. And then he said it. And it's like this tiny thing that I always glossed over, but the looked at him and loved him. If you ground yourself with that fact that you love this person, you pray, you work with God to, how do you make that manifest? But if that's your grounding, now they still might in the immediate, like if you're having to tell them something tough, when you're talking about overcoming, like a difficult, how do you get to a place with full disclosure and accountability? Accountability can sometimes look like tough love. Yeah. I think grounding yourself in that concept of loving the other person before moving into, whatever the thing that they may not want to hear, and that may not, that may still generate maybe a temporary conflict, or maybe they need to go away and think about that for a little bit, and it's not gonna have an immediate, oh well, that's okay because you loved me, and I could tell you loved me when you said that. But I think it really does make a difference, even if it takes them and you a night to sleep on it. Or I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
It may not be what they wanted to hear, but I've had bosses and friends and whatever, but that can tell me things that I don't want to hear, and it's okay because they did it from a place that I knew was with my best interest in mind.
Yeah.
And you don't always realize that right away, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that needs to be okay.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, and it requires a level of trust, right? To say it, even if even if I disagree with you, or even if, whatever you just said to me, doesn't sit well right away. Yeah. Or it's something you didn't want to hear. There's a level of trust that has to be there
Oh yeah.
to be able to sit with it and say, well, they wouldn't say it just to hurt me. So there's something here. Right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Which takes
Hard.
time. Like you're not gonna know somebody for a couple days and then throw them that little bone,
Yeah.
a little gem of a conversation. I mean, it takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. But that starts too with, and that's something, I've been studying a lot about, like the gifts of the Holy Spirit, right? So that's one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit is words of wisdom and words of knowledge, and being able to call out, exhort somebody, calling out the good and the bad in somebody. That's a gift of the Spirit. And that's something, especially in a community of believers, that we're supposed to do for each other.
A compliment sandwich is a gift of the Spirit. Is that what you're
It
saying?
always has to be like that, right? Here's your compliment, Oreo. Yeah. But starting with calling out the good things, or the gifts that you see in somebody, sets up a good foundation to be able to, trust them to in the future when they're operating outside of the Spirit, or when they need to be called out on something and held accountable, that you trust that they see the good and the messy in you. But that's hard. Yeah.
And being able to do that well is an acquired skill
Yeah.
that you cannot acquire if you avoid doing that, avoid the tough stuff.
Yeah. And that's something too that I've been thinking about. Friendship, as we kind of start to close, I know we gotta get going, but friendship has been, just like everything else, super hard during COVID. Just because we were isolated to begin with, and then we really literally were isolated, right? So that's been hard, right? There's things that maybe, despite best intentions, we're kind of left by the wayside, and might be something to pick up again when we can get back to normal. But what have you learned about friendship during COVID? And then likewise, what is something that you think would be helpful to keep in mind as we start to get back to normal, as we start to hopefully kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel and move forwards into a little bit of normalcy? I know for me, that's going to take a while to feel comfortable just moving through the world confidently again, right? And that might mean something for my relationships too. Do y'all have any thoughts on what you've learned during this time and what you feel like might be helpful moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I can say that I think that certain of my friendships have grown more in the last year in depth, in a beautiful way, actually, than they had in a longer time than that before then, if that makes any sense. And so I guess what I mean is that there was some really extra development of the depth of friendship in the last year. And I think part of that is because we had to focus on being with each other rather than just doing things together, and yes, I would like to get back to doing some more things together, but some of those things serve as distractions, and you're in each other's company, but you're not necessarily digging in deep into each other's lives. And um, first of all, we have a common enemy that we can bond in the face of. How are you dealing with this pandemic? How are you dealing with getting your groceries, everyday life? How are you dealing with having to wear a mask all day? How are you dealing with, you know, divisiveness in the country, social justice issues, stuff like that? Like all these things that have generated good conversation, that have, like for example, Karen and Susan and I and Hope. And some others have joined us at times, but we have been taking walks on Saturday mornings, and it's kind of one of these, like, why didn't we think of that before? But we didn't think of it before at all, and it just wasn't a thing. It just wasn't like, let's just go take a walk together. And when the whole world of options is at your disposal, you're probably going to get a meal together. And I don't know. I feel like we you obviously can have conversation at a meal. There's some other activities where you can't as much, but we would dig in deep on these walks, like something happened in the news, we would talk about it. Somebody's birthday's coming up, we would plan it. Like, how do we love that person? And I just found out more about them in just this treasure like way during this time. And and I've had some other friends that we've done some similar kind of quality things together, just spending time together in conversation, and whether in person or virtually. Um, yeah, I think that when you strip away all the distractions, all that's there is you and the other person, and there you go. You get right into the meat of your friendship that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. When it's just you and the other person, you're either going to move towards each other, or that's uncomfortable. And, you might not have gotten to that place of being able to make that connection. So you move away from each other. Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah. Karen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love what you said. I feel like it's so true. Just the beauty of being in a space together and knowing more of each other's hearts. Like, that has been so valuable. And I know not everybody may have experienced that at this point, but it's also happened in my relationship with God, because I've been forced to slow down, and it's a work in progress, but I think that also impacts your friendships when you're prioritizing him a little differently or making more space. And so that's been a really uh, unique kind of impact on other things too, and the way I see the world and my friends. And I think too, our group has suffered some pretty traumatic losses or scares or things like that. And um, I know this group has always been supportive and loving of each other. Like, that has been my experience and what I've observed. But I feel like more than ever, like, this pandemic has shown a light on how much we need each other, even if it's just a word of encouragement, and or letting somebody pet your dog, or Flynn sometimes is our go-to if we need a cuddle, or Maris dogs or some others. I mean, it's just I think we have more time and space to go, oh my gosh, this friend has a need or a concern or care, and maybe being a little more prayerful with, like, how can I pray for them, and how can I keep up with what's going on there?
Yeah.
I don't know. This group has really seemed to respond in that way, and I hope it continues. And I hope if people are listening to this and you don't feel like you've gotten that care, I hope that you'll speak up, because I think that's the heart of the group, is that we could be that for each other. So.
Yeah. That's huge. Go ahead, Andrea.
And if this isn't a group that you're normally part of, but you happen to be watching this, or someone tells you about it, I mean, I think that's the kind of thing that we would want to see the church take hold of, so that it, as we said in the beginning, that it transcends singleness or life stage that you're in, because those things have been, those things have been just such a light in my life, and I know we have tried very hard to be a light in each other's lives, and we don't want it to be, and nor should it be, exclusive to people in a particular life stage, like single adulthood.
Yeah.
Because it is possible to be isolated and married, or it is possible to be isolated and older and just not plugged into a community like this. And I think that going back to what I think that the church could offer, would be to make that known and make that available to people at every different point, because it has been life-saving.
Yeah. And that's something that I've only known y'all during COVID, which is weird, but that's something that I noticed after a while, of just spending time with y'all, mostly virtually. But y'all have cared for each other really well, since I've seen you do that since I started in August. There is a level of whatever you want to call it, care or community or togetherness that, and let me tell you, especially from like a pastoral care lens, that is like the pastor's dream, right? That is something that, you know, as a minister, that is what you're trying to cultivate. And it is like pulling teeth sometimes to get people to, and maybe the pandemic has helped us do this, to declutter our lives enough to see each other's needs. But I mean, that is huge. And right. And that's something that, because one minister or one person, you know, one leader of a group like this can't do that. And there has to be buy-in. And so that's something that has been so encouraging to me as I've watched y'all navigate over the last 5 months, 6 months that I've been with you. That's huge, right? That's not super common, even in the church, to have that level of care for each other. So thank you for for doing that. That is super encouraging to me. Awesome. Well, I think we're at the end of our time a little
On that
bit.
note,
You want me to tell a friendship joke?
Yes.
and now back to sad again.
Oh, I did look up friendship jokes, and there's not very good ones out there. Not that funny. I'll spare you.
Yes. In our time of Q&A, we can tell some friendship jokes. But yeah, so I hope for y'all listening that this was helpful, that this was meaningful, and that as we're in this week of Valentine's Day, but also just moving forward, that we can kind of, yes, regain the love of friendship, the love that can be found in friendship, and that I hope you feel emboldened to pursue that. And just know that this is a community where you can do that. I'm grateful for that. So we will jump on Zoom now for Q&A. And so click the Zoom link and we will see you there. Bye, y'all. I guess this is our version of Revlog. So I don't know how Chris signs off on Revlog, but that's my sign off.
Yeah, it just kind of sits there and is like,
Yeah.
and, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
There.
We'll see y'all on Zoom. Bye, y'all. Okay, so let me stop recording.